Good evening and welcome to another one of our town halls. It looks like we have around 18 or 19 people tonight. We had one earlier today, and I want to thank you for joining us. I know we just had a town hall quarterly division meeting 6 weeks ago, so this won't be like our normal division meetings where we go through a number of different activities we're doing as a group, but it's really designed for you to ask questions. I'll give a very brief presentation and they'll be designed really for a Q&A for those of you who are joining us. Jenny is on with us and is serving as our moderator again. And I just would like to ask her to kind of go over the moderator rules, and I shouldn't say rules, but the moderator process of how you can ask your questions, and then we'll get into a couple slides and then field your questions.
Great, thanks, Glenn. Okay, so as in past town halls, you can comment to everyone in the chat feature, or you can select my name individually, and that will be an anonymous way to ask a question. So feel free to do that. This is being recorded so that we can add it to isu.edu/townhall, where our archive of town hall sessions live. And also we are streaming to YouTube as well. At 10 minutes after, we're going to lock the meeting just for security purposes. And that's all I have right now. And I'll turn it back to you, Glenn, for your slides, and then we'll do some questions.
All right, thank you, Jenny. So again, welcome to our town hall of June 8th. And just quickly want to go back over our culture. The fact that we wanted everything we do needs to be rooted in trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And it's the way we start all of our meetings. And as we have in each of our meetings, I'll be happy to answer any questions regarding those 4 items and questions you have around that. So the first thing I'd like to do tonight is talk about our budget and a budget update, and then talk about the roaring back plans, and then have a Q&A. I want to thank all of you for the hard work you've been doing, those of you who are on campus, and I think probably most of you who are on tonight are individuals who are working on campus through this pandemic. I want to thank you for the work you're doing for our students and faculty and staff, as well as those of you who have transitioned to working from home. I know that has not been easy for a lot of individuals. I know it's been a change for me as well. Just want to thank all of you for your patience during the past several months, for your bleeding black and orange, or I should say orange and black, during that same time frame. So as we first look at the budget, when we last met, I had told you that we were working through the budget process, and we had identified a task that we had to solve for, but we had not completed the budget setting process for 21. So just a real quick overview. We went into the FY21 budget with an $11.7 million deficit, projected deficit. That was the $6 million deficit that we had this year, plus the 1% holdback that we had from the fall. We had a tuition shortfall tied to enrollments of $3 million, and then we had an additional 1% holdback in the spring. And so this was all pre-COVID. So we had an $11.7 million structural deficit going into next year. We had shared with the board that this year we were expecting a $6 million deficit. And while it's never a comfortable situation to be in sharing that with your board, nor if you're on the board, allowing that to happen, but we talked with the board about doing a multi-year approach to getting back to breaking even. But that was before we went south on our tuition shortfall and before we had the 2% holdback from the state. And so we clearly did not go from 6 million to 3 million. We went from 6 million to 11.7 million. So we went in the wrong direction. $11.7 million structural deficit is not sustainable while we have a healthy amount of reserves. The 11.7 million would evaporate our reserves pretty quickly. And so in addition, we had a state ordered 5% one-time reduction for next year of $5 million. So we were really, if we absent any change from the way we do business this year,
2168.
Absent any change, we would end up with a $16 million loss next year. So we had to refocus this spring on solving our budget problem. And I have to say that I'm overwhelmed by the response we received from leadership across the campus. Every area of the campus participated, and we actually designed a budget that eliminates the $11.7 million deficit. That is huge. That's several years ahead of schedule. And it actually shows external to Idaho State. It shows our state legislators. It shows our bond rating agency and others that we were serious about balancing our budget and eliminating the structural deficit. That 11.7 million, while that was, we achieved that through a number of items, a number of actions. Part of it was eliminating over 100 positions. A little over half of those positions were vacant positions that we have permanently eliminated from our structure, and the other half were filled positions and positions that we had to unfortunately eliminate. That solved the 11.7 million going forward. We now had a $5 million one-time reduction that was requested by the state, and that's related to the COVID-19 pandemic and the shortfall that the state is anticipating receiving. In order to balance that, we unveiled a furlough plan, which will generate $2 million of savings, and salary savings of $3 million. And the way we've calculated that is we've looked at typically the turnover that we go through every year. When there's a vacant position, those savings stay with the unit until they fill the position, and they can reallocate that to something else. Because of the serious nature that our budget is in at this point in time, we decided to centralize all those savings during the year on a one-time basis. So both the furlough plan and the salary savings are one-time responses to a one-time reduction. So I think we can pause for a moment and really be proud of the work that campus did to eliminate our structural deficit and to come up with a plan to address the $5 million one-time reduction. Having said that, we also have to keep in mind that we do not know what's going to happen with enrollments this fall. So what I mean by that is if enrollments decline, we'll have a revenue shortfall, and we'll then have to go back and reevaluate how do we address that. Now, we're doing everything we can to prevent that, but if you read in the media and read what other universities are facing, there are projections of being down anywhere from 10 to 30% in students this fall. So we're hopeful that that doesn't happen here. We're trying to do everything we can to generate interest for coming to campus in the fall. And if our enrollments hold, we will have solved our structural deficit, and we will have address the $5 million one-time reduction. Next slide, please. In terms of the, well, and also on the budget, depending on your questions later, we also have a couple of slides that we can show you that shows each of the units and how they have participated. This hasn't just been classified or unclassified or faculty. It's been all classes of employees, and it also hasn't been finance and business affairs, or it hasn't just been academics. It's everyone on campus has participated. So after the budget, let's go forward with roaring back. So that's where we are financially. If we're now on the roaring back plans, by now you all should have received quite a few campus updates as to where we are with coming back. You know, it was pretty, while it seemed difficult to shut down or scale back because we didn't really close campus, but as we moved from the on-campus environment to online, that was a much easier task in retrospect than what we're going through right now, determining how do we come back to campus. We have a rebound plan that is constructed within the guidelines that the governor and the state's rebound plan is set. There are 4 stages of this. We're currently in stage 3 through June 12th. And within stage 3, we're supposed to continue to utilize telework as much as we can. And then as if we do things on campus, we need to adhere to the guidelines for physical distance, increased cleaning and disinfecting, and the use of face coverings. The next stage, stage 4, is the potential for that begins next Monday. And stage 4 includes rotating staffing, modified services. However, the important thing to look at for stage 4 is that we want to continue the use of remote work where possible. And so if we go to stage 4 next week, it's still my understanding that for finance and business affairs, we will try to continue working remotely as much as we can for those of you who are currently working remotely. We have a couple of links in here to the rebound plan and to the resources that are available for supervisors in putting together your checklist and your rebound plan. So the 2 things I wanted to cover was just tell you where we were with the budget. Wanted to briefly talk about roaring back plans. And then the remainder of the time, I would really like to just devote to your questions, concerns, comments. And so the floor is open. So Jenny, do we have any questions?
We sure do, Glenn. We have one question, and the question is about furloughs and how that works. So how does the salary become lower through the furlough days? So if you could explain the process for us, and maybe Trevor can show us the furlough website.
Okay, so as we put the furlough plan together, we carefully thought through what would be the fairest way to apply a furlough. Certainly one methodology would say every employee at whatever level takes the same number of days. But that would produce an inequity in that if everyone had to take 1 day without pay, those employees who were at the lower end of the pay scale would be taking a much larger or more significant pay cut percentage-wise than those who were at the upper end of the scale. So instead, we chose to scale the number of furlough days by salary level. So those at the upper ends of the salary continuum are taking 13 furlough days. Those of employees who make less than $40,000 a year take no furlough days. There will be guidance coming out of Human Resources in the next couple of weeks as to the forms that we're able to fill out. We can either identify what day or days we want to take the furloughs on, or we can also indicate that we would like the salary reduction related to the furlough days to be spread evenly over the year. One other aspect of the furlough days is that half of the days need to be taken between July 1 and December 31st, and the other half after December 31st. We split it into two categories, again, from a fairness perspective. If we do not have a decrease in revenues in the fall, we may be able to look at having fewer furlough days. And so we could adjust the furlough days down in the spring. Likewise, if revenues have a significant decrease, we would have a plan that has the ability for us to increase the furlough days if needed. So the fairness issue of the furloughs was to weight the number of days to a higher number of days for the higher paid employees. So it's based on your salary.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. Next question, is there going to be a plan or policy issued regarding consolidating procurement of PPE and cleaning supplies?
Would, Katie, I think you're on, aren't you?
Yes, I'm here.
Katie, do you want to respond to that and where we are?
Sure. So we have currently 4 committees that are working on plans for roaring back. So those are related to employee operations, student services, the community or the general public, and then the instruction committee. So this is a topic that actually we've all been working on and discussing through, and there isn't a formalized decision made yet. But my understanding is they're putting forth a recommendation tomorrow to more centralized procurement of those types of items and make decisions related to how they are. So building the process by which they can be ordered by departments and distributed. So I don't have an answer yet necessarily, but I can tell you that's a topic of conversation right now, and it's coming.
Thank you, Katie.
Is everyone supposed to be back in the office on Monday?
I can give you a resounding no. Those of you who are currently working on campus and were deemed essential personnel for working on campus, continue to go to do what you're doing. Those of you who have been working from home, teleworking, you would continue to do that unless you have heard from your supervisor. Some groups in or stage 4 are looking at rotating schedules. They may have a team A and a team B. Team A comes in several days a week. Team B comes in opposite days. But each of these decisions are being handled locally by your supervisor. But my position at this point in time is we have been effectively teleworking, and in stage 4, we're to continue teleworking where possible. So no, if you hear that we go to stage 4, that is not a call, if you will, for you to show up to work on Monday.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. Back to the budget. The question is there a wage freeze or will staff still receive raises?
Trying to think the best way to answer that is the CEC that was recommended in the budget from the state. The state every year, state legislature considers a change in employee compensation or a component that we refer to as the CEC. And they issue guidelines as to what the raise will be. Some years it's a 3% pool. Some years it may be a 1 or 2% pool. Prior to COVID, the legislature was considering a 2% pool, or the legislature had considered a 2% pool, and that was in the budget. Because of COVID and the pressures on the state's budget, the state has decided to not fund the CEC plan at this point in time. Now, there are a handful of employees on campus who will receive a salary adjustment, but that is because in state law, if you are a unclassified employee, the minimum salary for an unclassified employee is above the minimum for one of the levels of class. There's a certain level of classified employee, and the pay minimums for the state for classified employees on various pay grades was slightly increased this year. And so by state law, this handful of employees were required to get a modest increase in pay, keeping in line with that minimum floor going up. The fact that the pay grade floors increased did not impact our employees because we have had a long-standing practice at ISU of paying above that minimum floor for all pay grades. So I'm not sure if Brian Sagendorf is on the line tonight. I don't think he's on I don't see him on the call. I was just going to ask if he had any other thoughts on that. But that is where we are with the change in compensation plan for this year.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. Slightly related to that, what are our current employment number? What are our current enrollment numbers, and how will this affect the deficit?
Well, as I mentioned earlier tonight, the current budget that eliminated our structural deficit assumed no increases in students. But we don't know what we will experience this fall in terms of enrollments. Right now, we're running behind where we were last year at this point in time. In speaking with Dr. Woodworth-Nye, our provost today, she is still very confident that we're going to see students make a decision later in the process. The national data from surveys that are out have indicated that students don't know if they're going to return to school this fall, if they're going to take a gap year or what they're going to do. Part of it is related to the survey data that says students did not necessarily like the experience of going to an online environment. And if you have any freshman students or freshman to be students in your household or in your extended family, you may have heard from them that they want the college experience. They don't want to sit at home in mom and dad's basement and take courses for college. They want that college experience. Because of that, they have not decided yet if they're going to school. They're waiting to hear if campuses are open, if residence halls are open. And so again, Dr. Woodworth-Nye believes they'll be making their decision more like in July this year, as opposed to in the past, those decisions were made in April and May. Now, what are we doing at ISU? We're taking that data and taking it to heart and saying, how can we open this fall and give students a face-to-face collegiate experience within the safety guidelines put out by the Center for Disease Control with social distancing and whatnot. That may mean a few less large activities by those freshman students, but by and large, they can come to campus and begin their college career face-to-face. We are trying to do everything we can to support that. And we believe, the administration, the leadership team of the university believes, if we can set that environment and communicate that environment to our prospective students, we may mitigate some of the decrease in enrollment. The hope would be that we would mitigate all of it, but we just won't know until we get into August. We'll have a better idea in July. But at this point in time, we're running behind where we were last year. And that does not bode well. But then we have never treaded, we haven't treaded this ground before. So we don't know when the decisions will be made. This is the same thing every university across the country is going through right now.
Thanks, Glenn. Next question, do we have a plan for sports in the fall?
We are, our athletic director is pretty much on daily conference calls with both our conference as well as the NCAA. And we're waiting for guidance from both the conference and the NCAA as to what fall sports will look like, as to whether there'll be modified seasons, when they will start, what the social distancing requirements will be in the athletic venues. You may have heard that with the NBA, for instance, there's been talk of having NBA games without fans. You may have seen that NASCAR last week or 2 weeks ago resumed races, and it was really interesting to watch the races on TV and not see the fans in the stands. So we don't know what that will be like, but I can tell you that within the last week or 2 weeks, we've had over 80 student athletes return to campus and begin some of their training for fall.
Okay. Thanks, Glenn. Next question, will there be more furloughs if the need arises?
That's a good question, and we have not crossed that bridge yet. I think once we receive our fall numbers and once we get more information from the state as to whether they will ask us to give more money back, at that point in time, we will have to reassess what the deficit will be and what our options will be. So at this point in time, there's not a plan to increase furloughs, and there's not a pre-plan that says under these circumstances we would increase furloughs. I think what we would want to do is the same thing we did for our budget this year and for the $5 million. Let's determine how much the task is, and then what are our options for balancing the budget.
Thanks, Glenn. Next question, will there be layoffs for classified employees?
Related to the FY21 budget, in Finance and Business Affairs, we eliminated 26 positions. Many of those were vacant positions. I believe a little over half were non-classified, a few under half were classified. Many of those classified positions were occupied by people who had already submitted their retirements for next year. And however, there are several positions that have incumbents that will be eliminated. We're working through that this month, and individuals who are affected should hear something within the next several weeks from their supervisors.
Okay, next question, Glenn. Departments are asking if and when we might receive emergency funding at the state or federal level and how those funds will be distributed if they're received.
Okay, so first let me tell you about the federal refunding process. The CARES Act identified or earmarked about $7.1 million for Idaho State University. The first 50% or $3.5 million of that was specifically targeted towards students and financial aid. We put together a plan to distribute that $3.5 million to our students, and through the financial aid office and the student accounts office, we're currently implementing that plan. The second $3.5 million can be used for a number of COVID-related expenses. When we first heard about the law, the guidance from the Department of Ed there was a very liberal interpretation or liberal description of how we could use those funds. As the weeks have gone on, the items we can use those funds for has become more narrow, which is requiring us to be more diligent about what we do to receive those funds. Now, we have applied for the funds through the Office of Sponsored Research or grants and programs, and we have received notice that we are qualified to receive those. So over the summer, we will be receiving those dollars. In addition, there was an amount of money that the acronym for that plan is GEAR. There's an amount of money within the GEAR program that is allocated to the governor of each state. And our governor has a working committee that's headed by his chief of staff. And there are representatives from K-12 through higher ed. The money is eligible for K-12 through higher ed. Our state board has been working with the presidents across our institutions to identify needs for us, and they've communicated it to that committee. So we may get some money for reimbursement out of that fund. What we need to be careful of is if we can receive money, for instance, for IT infrastructure, and if it's limited by one of the funds or the other, we need to make sure we put that reimbursement in on the right fund. So we're taking time right now to gather information, to wait and hear more about how much money we might be eligible for GEAR. And at the same time, there are some special FEMA dollars available, and we need to look at what the rules are for there. With that said, we have not stopped spending money related to COVID. The UBOs in concert with the accounting office put together a plan at the beginning of the CARES Act, and even prior to the CARES Act, of establishing a new account type, COVID-19, in any departments purchasing fund or purchasing items specifically related to the pandemic are to be using the COVID-19 account type. In that, if they are, we are then able to pull a report at any time for specific expenditures related to COVID-19. As we get further down the road, we will be analyzing those expenditures, comparing it to the revenue that we may get from the feds, and hopefully we will be reimbursed 100%. If we are not reimbursed 100%, we will then have a discussion about, do we use reserves? So at this point in time, departments, as long as they're tracking the expenditures using the COVID-19 form or account type, we will have information available to identify who's spending the money for these items. So it doesn't quite give you a full protocol as to how we will do the reimbursement, but we have the tracking mechanism in place.
Thanks, Glenn. When fall semester starts, how many students will be in the smaller rooms versus the bigger rooms?
Well, that depends on social distancing. And right now, the facilities organization is working diligently to review every classroom on campus to determine the COVID occupancy rate. So the planetarium, for instance, holds several hundred people, and it may be reduced to only being able to service 40 or 50 students. So our very large classrooms will be dealing with smaller class sizes. Our small classrooms will be dealing with even smaller class sizes. Now, this could all be subject to change depending on what stage we were in and what guidance we received from CDC. But at this point in time, Cheryl and her team are reviewing every possible space on campus to hold classrooms or classes, and then what that COVID number is. The other thing that we want to do, based on the comments I made earlier about freshmen wanting the college experience, we are looking to make as many freshman and sophomore classes as possible available on campus, and potentially moving the junior or senior classes more towards online if we have space constraints. We have about 5,000 sections scheduled for the fall. And so academic affairs and the registrar's office are working on the delivery side while Cheryl is providing them information with maximum occupancy.
That is, we are caught up on questions for the moment, Glenn.
Okay. Well, I'm giving you a few minutes to type in more questions. Let me just share with you a little bit about the academic plan for this fall. Many of you may have seen or heard in the news media different schools talking about being done by Thanksgiving, starting earlier. We are going to have the same start date. However, we are going to try as hard as we can, for all intents and purposes, to complete course instruction by Thanksgiving. And then the week after Thanksgiving, having online finals or projects due. Academic Affairs has carefully looked at the calendar. Some of our sister institutions may have to start earlier than they had planned. We have enough days and enough instruction hours between our current start date and the Thanksgiving break to satisfy the accreditors. The other schools didn't have that, and so that's why they may be moving their start date up. But the intent of what we want to do is eliminate any on-campus presence for instruction after Thanksgiving, so that we don't have students traveling home or traveling out of state for the Thanksgiving holiday and then coming back with the potential for community spread.
Okay, Glenn, does this apply for online classes?
Does this apply? Is there any more to that question, or?
No, but I'll give them a chance to follow up
Okay.
with some context. And then while we're waiting on that, next question, is there a plan to encourage employees to work from home between Thanksgiving and Christmas?
We have not discussed that up to this point in time. We've really been focused on what does the calendar mean for students and course delivery. And certainly Katie had talked about the 4 teams that are in place right now, looking at decisions that we have to make. And I believe we will be looking further at what happens between Thanksgiving and Christmas. But at this point in time, we have not fully vetted that. Is that correct, Katie?
Yeah, that's correct. And just to jump in and kind of piggyback on that idea a little bit, with one of the things to keep in mind with us moving into stage 4 is that there's not currently anything after stage 4. So where we're moving into this space that is going to be a new normal. Our new normal is likely to be continued work from home for some people, continued rotating staffing, continued physical distancing, continued face coverings, sanitization. All of those things may be our new normal for a while, and we don't know when that will end or when that will change. So one of the things that we're really trying hard to build into all of the planning phase is that we have to be able to adapt and be nimble, and sort of move and shift as things happen. So as we see potential spikes in cases, which could be statewide, it could be regionally, we will have to react either at the regional level or at the state level and be able to move to or from various phases very quickly. So I think in doing this, we will have a lot of plans. So now that we have done we're essentially fully online, other than the essential staff that I know have been there supporting the university since we went remote. We will be able to be flexible, whether it's that we're working the online model if cases spike for some reason, or we're doing this sort of hybrid model with skeleton crews, or we're in this new normal phase. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is that we don't exactly know what's coming. So to predict all the way out to Thanksgiving is a little bit hard to do, but I think that's certainly something that will be on the table and will be considerations as we go forth into the fall. And we'll be talking about things like that sort of as it evolves.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. Glenn, follow up for context on the previous question. Is the class schedule for face-to-face classes the same as online classes this fall?
My understanding would be yes.
Okay. And someone is asking if we can see the slides again that show how much each department contributed to the budget deficit.
Yes. I don't have it by department, but I have it by organization, by vice president level across campus. Let me try to share. Ginny, can I share a screen?
Yes,
Yeah.
you can. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, I might have to have Trevor let you do it. There we go.
Okay, so I'm not sure which screen. Is the screen that you're seeing, does it say budget balancing summary FY21 and 22? Okay. So earlier I spoke about 11.7 or 11.8 million is our permanent budget savings. And we achieved that number by eliminating 4.5 million of vacant positions. We have had a number of positions or PCNs that have been on the books for a number of years without anyone in them. And the budget savings goes to a department when they don't fill that, and they were using those dollars in some cases to fund other things on campus or within their department. So we permanently eliminated those vacant positions. And this is actually the next step in what we were doing with the budget reset anyway. We thought we'd eliminated a lot of those last year, but through the budget process and through this task, we identified even more positions. We then eliminated $2.2 million of positions that were occupied by individuals. We reduced irregular and part-time expenditures by $900,000. And then we reduced operating expenditures by 3.6 million. Now, we didn't just cut expenses. We still had some strategic investments, and we've identified new revenues that we're expecting to come in over the next 2 fiscal years of about $482,000 a year. And so our total permanent budget savings was 11.8 million. The one-time savings, 2.75, comes from the centralized salary savings I discussed, and 2 million from the furlough program. If we now go to what departments made up that 11.8 million, the first slide was, what types of positions, the revenues. Now, what departments or divisions? Academic affairs, which included all of the colleges except for the Division of Health Sciences, had $3.8 million of permanent reductions, or 4.8% of their budget. KDHS and the colleges within the health sciences, also 4.8% of their budget, or 2.1 million. The Office of Research eliminated 5.8% of their budget, or $376,000. Athletics was $326,000, or 4.1%. Student affairs and enrollment management was 4%, or $1.5 million. Our number one function right now on campus, our number one priority should be the recruitment and, just as important, the retention of the students we have. So there was a concerted effort that while we wanted student affairs and enrollment management to look at their budgets just like we did, look at their operations, could we do things, can we do things more efficiently, we did not want to cut off our right hand while our left hand was trying to bring students in. We wanted to do this in a concerted, strategic manner. So that's why you see student affairs and enrollment management having the smallest decrease. But nonetheless, a 4% decrease in their budget is 1.25 million. It's a pretty significant number. University advancement, there was a $260,000 reduction, or 6% of their budget. Our division reduced our budget by 6.6%, or 2.6 million. We eliminated positions from the AVP level through some of the classified positions as well. So this was not just let's look at classified, let's look at mid-level managers. We have one fewer AVPs. We eliminated several director level positions. We eliminated some manager positions. We have reorganized how the work is going to be done, and that enabled us to eliminate 6.6% of our budget. And the Office of the President eliminated $859,000, or 13.4% of their budget. So overall, this 11.7 or $11.8 million of permanent budget savings equated to 6.2% of our budget. In terms of the by employee group, you'll be able to see that this is not done on the backs of faculty. It's not done on the backs of non-classified, and it's not done on the backs of classified. We've eliminated positions in each of those three categories. If you want to break academic affairs down further, we can look at the colleges, and each of the colleges reduced significantly, from arts and letters at 4.3% to COSI at 5.1%. And then across the Division of Health Sciences, colleges that bring in a significant amount of revenue and a significant amount of revenue over expenses still reduced their budgets, anywhere from 4% to 5.2%. So hopefully that answers the question. And if you have follow-up, please let Ginny know.
Thanks, Glenn. I think we are all caught up. Unless we have any more stragglers, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, for your participation, for your questions, but most of all, I want to thank you for the amount of effort that you've put in over the last several months in helping us through this uncharted waters. The faculty did just an amazing job of within a 2-week period converting all of our face-to-face classes to online delivery for the remainder of the semester. We graduated a number of students. We didn't let them down by not being able to complete their senior year. I also know that the faculty could not have done that without the support of our division and others. Those of you in IT who did everything you could to upgrade our network, to make sure that Blake and the ETS team had what they needed. The amazing work that was done by our ITS organization in quickly getting remote parking lot Wi-Fi centers set up. A couple of times I was told, well, this is going to take 6 weeks or this will take a couple of months. And Tony and his team turned the whole parking lot around in just an unbelievably fast amount of time. The amount of work those of you in facilities have been doing to make sure that we have a safe and sanitized environment is just, it's been unbelievable. The work that the EHS team, EH&S team has been involved with looking at PPE. What can we do to make sure we can source supplies? What can we do to make sure our employees who are at work are safe, and the employees when they come back to work will be safe? I know I'm leaving some people out here, but across the board in HR, the work that's been done to field the questions that they've had to field from everyone through this crisis. And then the accounting people. It may be unbeknownst to a number of you on the call right now, but we've had someone coming in once a week to pick up mail, to distribute checks, make sure that that mail is delivered. And then we've had someone come in once a week to make sure that the check run goes. The payroll had to be processed during this time. Just the amount of work you all are doing is unbelievable. And I just want to thank you personally for that effort. Are there any other questions, Jenny, or is that?
I think that'll do it. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Okay, so if there's any other questions that come in, we will answer those and get those back to you. And again, I want to thank you for your time tonight.